They said she had wandered off, that toddlers do that sometimes. But when Ava's pink blanket was found at the edge of the woods, torn, muddy and warm, her mother knew better. And when an unfamiliar German shepherd appeared at their front door, covered in briar cuts, his eyes wide with urgency, she didn't scream. She opened the door. Welcome to Saved by Tales. Before we begin this powerful story of instinct, courage, and unbreakable bonds, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt a dog knew something before anyone else did? If you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The morning Ava disappeared, the sky had been heavy with clouds, not the dark, brooding kind, but soft and grey, like a wool blanket stretched over the sleepy town of Windermere. Claire had left the back door open, just for a minute. She remembered that part clearly. 1 minute to bring in the laundry before the rain came. 1 minute where the screen door creaked and slammed shut behind her. 1 minute, and her daughter Ava had vanished. Ava was only 3 years old, small for her age, with sun-bleached curls that never stayed tied, and a voice that sounded like birdsong when she laughed. She loved her backyard. The swing under the maple tree, the sandbox filled with broken toys, the plastic garden gnome she insisted was named Sir Giggles. But when Claire returned with the damp clothes in her arms and found the swing empty, the gnome tilted sideways and the gate ajar, her breath caught in her throat. Ava, she called, eyes darting across the lawn. Sweetheart, no answer, only the soft rattle of wind through tree branches. The search began within minutes. Neighbors spread out across fields. Police brought in dogs. Drones scanned the forest to the west, but the woods behind Windermere were old, dense and winding, the kind of place stories warn children to avoid. By nightfall, no one had found her, and then the dog came. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Claire heard the scratching. She had been sitting on Ava's bed, clutching the child's favorite stuffed bunny, her fingers wrapped tightly around one floppy ear. The bunny's fur had grown rough with love, its nose rubbed bare. She had whispered to it as if it might answer, as if it might tell her where her daughter had gone. The sound came again, 3 sharp scratches against the front door. Claire stood, heart hammering. Her husband Mark was asleep downstairs on the couch. She moved quietly, her feet cold on the hardwood floor. When she reached the entryway and peeked through the window, she froze. A dog, large, mottled black and grey, a German shepherd. His fur was wet, his ears alert, and his eyes, amber and wild, looked directly at her. Claire didn't recognize him. No collar, no tag, but his front legs were scratched, his paws muddy, as if he'd run through thorns and brush, and there, clenched in his teeth, was something soft and pink. She opened the door. The dog stepped back, carefully dropping what he held onto the mat. Claire's knees buckled. It was Ava's blanket, torn at one corner, mud-caked, still warm. "Mark!" she screamed, her voice cracking. Her husband came running, eyes wide with confusion that turned to horror as he saw the blanket in her hands, and the strange dog standing at their doorstep. "He found her," Claire whispered. "He must have found her," but the dog didn't move. He stood there breathing heavily, then turned and took 2 steps down the porch stairs, paused and looked back. "Is he waiting?" Mark said. The dog barked once, loud, urgent, then he ran. The next morning the dog returned. He came just before sunrise, covered in more scratches this time. His coat was damp, his eyes tired. In his mouth he carried Ava's pink shoe. Claire dropped to her knees. "Oh my God," she breathed. The police arrived within the hour, but when they followed the dog into the woods, they found nothing. No child, no sign of recent activity.
"It's just a stray,"
one officer said. "Probably picked up the scent, grabbed a shoe from a discarded pile." But Claire didn't believe that. She looked into the dog's eyes, and knew, "He knows where she is," she said. They named him Ranger, not officially. He still wore no tag, no chip, no collar, but the name seemed to fit. He was strong and silent, watchful, a guardian. For the next 3 nights, Ranger returned. Each time he brought something small, a hair clip, Ava's water bottle, a mitten, and each time he led them into the forest, deeper than the search teams had dared go. It was Mark who suggested they follow him alone. "No cameras, no uniforms, just us,"
he said.
Claire hesitated. "What if we get lost?"
"He's not going to let that happen."
At dawn they followed Ranger into the woods. The air was cool and smelled of pine and damp leaves. Branches scratched their arms as they pushed through undergrowth. Ranger moved ahead with confidence, never straying from a narrow, almost invisible trail. They walked for what felt like hours, and then Claire heard it. A sound so faint it almost didn't register. A whimper, soft, fragile, like a cry that had run out of strength. Ranger stopped, ears twitching.
Say.
He looked back, then he pushed through a curtain of ivy. On the other side was a clearing. At the center of it, a hollowed tree stump, wide enough for a small child to crawl into, and curled inside, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face pale but alive, was Ava. Claire ran.
She dropped to her knees beside the stump.
Reaching in, her hands trembling.
Ava,
she sobbed.
Say, baby, it's mommy.
The little girl blinked slowly, her lips cracked, her voice hoarse. Mommy.
I stayed. He told me to stay.
Claire lifted her into her arms, tears falling freely now. Mark stood frozen for a second, then fell beside them, wrapping them both in his arms. Ranger stood at the edge of the clearing, watching.
Ava was dehydrated, weak,
but otherwise unharmed.
She didn't speak much during the ambulance ride, only clutched her mother's hand and whispered, "He stayed with me all night, every night."
The paramedics assumed she meant an imaginary friend, but Claire and Mark knew better. They turned to look, but Ranger was gone.
We searched for him. 4 days, posters,
online groups, local shelters, but the dog who had saved their daughter had disappeared. Until 3 weeks later, on Ava's birthday, they were setting up balloons in the backyard, when Ava pointed toward the woods. There, she said.
He's back.
Ranger stood just beyond the trees, his body still, his eyes soft. Claire didn't hesitate this time. She walked straight to him, knelt down, and opened her arms.
He stepped forward, and this time, he stayed.
Windermere had changed. The local paper ran the story on its front page. Mystery dog leads family to missing girl. It spread like wildfire. News vans lined up outside the Culver's house for interviews. Reporters came from 3 counties over. But Claire and Mark gave only one statement. We don't know who he belonged to. We don't even know where he came from. All we know is, he saved our daughter's life. Ranger stayed, not just for a visit, but like he had always belonged.
He slept on their porch.
At first under the bench near the swing, Ava loved. Then he began curling up beside her bed each night, as if standing guard against nightmares. Mommy, Ava whispered one evening, her small hand resting on Ranger's thick fur.
He talks to me. Sal. Claire froze at the doorway. Ava, what do you mean, sweetheart? Ava smiled, not with words, like with pictures in my head.
Like he shows me things. Claire didn't know what to say. She kissed her daughter's forehead and tucked her in. That night, she barely slept. At first, Mark thought it was trauma.
She's 3, Claire. She was alone in the woods for days.
Probably hallucinated things to stay calm. But she was calm, Claire replied.
She wasn't scared at all.
She said he stayed the whole time, brought her berries, curled up with her to keep her warm. Mark said nothing, only sipped his coffee, and stared out the window where Ranger lay in the grass, nose twitching in his sleep. He had a scar across his left shoulder.
Old, jagged,
the kind soldiers might get from shrapnel. Claire noticed that detail the same day she caught Ava drawing pictures. Crayon sketches of Ranger standing in a forest, Ranger beside a helicopter, Ranger barking at a man in uniform.
Ava, where did you see this? She asked gently. Ava shrugged. In my head. He showed me.
Claire exchanged a glance with Mark. We need to find out where he came from, he said. They took him to the vet to scan for a chip. Nothing, no identification, no records. The vet said his teeth suggested he was older, maybe 7 or 8, but strong, she added.
Very strong. He's been trained, you can tell.
Watch how he waits for your command before entering a room. That's not just instinct, that's military-level obedience. Claire's chest tightened. What if he was a war dog? It made sense. The discipline, the scars, the way he patrolled the backyard at night, like it was a perimeter he had to guard. Mark raised the idea of calling veteran organizations. They started with canine foundations, but it was hard to identify a dog without a serial number, tattoo or chip, and every photo they submitted came back with the same result: no match. Ranger remained a ghost with amber eyes. One night, the dreams started, not Ava's, Claire's. She dreamed of fire, of a desert, of someone screaming a name over radio static. Bravo 1, do you copy?
She woke drenched in sweat, the sound of helicopter blades still pounding in her ears.
And Ranger was there, standing in the doorway of her bedroom, watching silently. Claire gasped.
You were there. He blinked once.
The town had questions too. Some whispered that it wasn't natural, that maybe the dog had led Ava into the woods in the first place, that it was all a trick. But Ava had changed since the ordeal. She was calmer,
quieter. She didn't cry at loud noises,
didn't flinch when she was alone in a room. She drew constantly now, scenes from memories that were not her own. A desert convoy, a man with a prosthetic leg petting Ranger, a boy in uniform hugging the dog before boarding a plane. How does she know this? Mark muttered, flipping through the pages. Claire had no answers, until the night they got a call. It was from a woman named Helen. I saw your flyer, she said. The one about the German shepherd who helped find your daughter. Claire held her breath.
Yes.
I think that's my son's dog. Claire nearly dropped the phone. Your son, Staff Sergeant Daniel Moore. He served 3 tours, Afghanistan, lost his partner, his K9, in a helicopter crash. They never found the body, just ashes and tags. Claire's heart pounded. And you think Ranger is? I saw the scar on his shoulder in the photo you posted. That's where he got hit saving my son. There was a firefight. He pulled Daniel behind a crate, took the shrapnel himself. The unit called him Ash. Claire's throat went dry. I need to see him, Helen whispered. They met at the edge of Windermere. Helen was older, small-framed, with grey in her hair, and grief in her eyes. When she saw Ranger, she gasped. Baby, she said, her voice trembling. Ranger stood still, his ears flicked. Then he whimpered, ran to her, pressed his face against her coat, and made a sound so human it shattered something inside Claire. Helen dropped to her knees, sobbing. I thought you were gone. But Ranger didn't stay. After a few minutes, he walked back to Ava and sat at her feet. Helen wiped her eyes. He found someone new to protect, she said. Claire nodded.
Yes, he's part of our family now.
Helen didn't argue, but before she left, she turned and added one more thing. You know, Daniel died 6 months ago. Claire blinked. I'm so sorry. Helen looked up at the sky. I like to think Ash knew, and he went looking for someone else who needed him. That night, Ava didn't draw soldiers. She drew herself, and Ranger, standing under stars, wrapped in light, as if something sacred had passed between them. Claire hung the drawing above her bed. Ranger was no longer just a mystery.
He was legend.
People in Windermere started leaving gifts on the Culver's porch. A girl from Ava's school brought a homemade collar with Ranger's name embroidered in bright blue thread. Someone else left a framed photo of an army dog beside a soldier's boots, captioned "Real heroes never die." But the Culvers didn't want attention. They wanted peace. Ranger still patrolled the yard every night. Claire noticed he stopped sleeping deeply. His ears always twitched, even in dreams, as if something was stirring, something coming. Winter arrived early that year. By mid-October, the trees shed their color in a single windstorm. Ranger grew restless. He would wake Ava in the middle of the night, nudging her until she got up. Then he'd walk her to the kitchen, wait until she had water, and walk her back to bed, like clockwork. Why's he doing that? Mark asked one night. Ava only said, because he knows what's coming. Claire didn't understand, until the day Ava collapsed at school. Doctors called it neuroblastoma.
Stage 3.
It had been growing silently, inside Ava's abdomen, pressing on nerves and organs without pain. But it explained the fatigue, the bruises, the soft wheeze in her laugh. Claire broke in the hallway. Mark stared at the wall like it had betrayed him. Only Ranger stayed calm. He sat by Ava's bed every moment in the hospital. He didn't bark, didn't whimper, didn't move unless Ava moved. The nurses let it happen. The doctor raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. After all, Ava's vitals improved when Ranger was near. Her pulse slowed, her breathing steadied. She slept better, ate better. He wasn't a pet anymore. He was treatment. One nurse, Julia, said something one night as she passed Ranger in the hallway. I think he knows, she whispered. Dogs like him, they always do. Claire's throat tightened. Knows what? Julia didn't answer, just smiled sadly, and disappeared around the corner. Ava's hospital room became a war tent. Drawings on every wall, stuffed animals in battle formation across the windowsill. AV poles hung with fairy lights, and Ranger, always Ranger. His eyes never left the door, as if watching for something Claire couldn't see. And then, one night, Ava whispered,
He's scared.
Claire knelt by the bed. Sweetheart, what do you mean? Ava's voice was soft. He doesn't want to lose me, not again. Again? He had a kid before, a boy, in the army.
He lost him.
Claire's hands shook. How do you know that? He showed me, Ava said simply. Ranger looked at her, and for a second Claire saw something deeper than instinct in those eyes. She saw memory, and mourning. The tumor shrank. Doctors were hopeful. One of them even joked that Ranger should be studied.
His presence correlated with faster healing.
Claire smiled, but Ranger didn't. That week he started limping, just barely. He didn't yelp, didn't whine, but Claire saw the stiffness in his gait, the way he moved like something inside was breaking. Mark said, maybe it's his age, but Claire wasn't convinced. It was like he was giving something of himself to Ava, and the more she healed, the more he withered. Christmas came. Ava was well enough to spend it at home. She decorated Ranger's food bowl with glitter glue and wrote, "To my best soldier." That night, as snow fell outside the window, Claire watched the two of them curled together by the fire, one child, one guardian, and thought, this is love. Not the kind in books, but the kind that chooses someone and never lets go. January brought a scan. The tumor was gone, completely. The doctor blinked 3 times before confirming it. Mark hugged Claire so tightly, she couldn't breathe. They went home that day. It was supposed to be the start of something new, but it was the beginning of goodbye. 2 days later, Ranger stopped eating. He didn't get up from Ava's bed. His breathing slowed. The vet came to the house. He's not in pain, she said gently. He's just tired. Ava refused to leave his side. He's going home, she whispered. Claire couldn't stop crying. But Ranger, he didn't look afraid, only grateful, like his mission was done. That night, Claire sat beside Ava and Ranger as the fire flickered low. Tell me something, she asked quietly. Why do you think he found you? Ava looked up. Because he wanted someone to finish the story. Claire tilted her head. What story? The one where the hero gets to rest. And then, just before dawn, with Ava's hand resting on his paw, Ranger exhaled, and didn't inhale again. Windmere held a funeral, not a grand one, just family, friends, the nurse who had believed, the vet who had stayed. They buried Ranger under the old oak tree in the Culver's yard. Ava painted a stone. On it she drew Ranger's face, a soldier's helmet, and a heart made of stars. Claire placed her hand on the soil, and whispered, "You saved her. You saved all of us." And as they walked back inside, a breeze swept through the branches, lifting the leaves in a silent salute.